rivers. La alegría de ver a sus hijas nacer le produjo llanto, y aquellos orificios por donde había sido penetrada por el abuelo fuego se llenaron de sus lágrimas de amor y de su sangre. Y así nacimos las lagunas y los lagos, y fue tanta la sangre que nos desbordamos, rompiendo montañas y bosques, y formando quebradas, riachuelos y ríos. And we flow with the blood of the mother, feed in our sisters and brothers, and reach in the oceans where we connect with other rivers and lagoons in one body of water. Y fluimos con sangre de la madre, alimentando a nuestras hermanas y hermanos hasta alcanzar los océanos, donde nos conectamos con otros ríos y con otras lagunas en un solo cuerpo de agua. And we carry the blood of our mother, cleaning her, soothing her, wetting her limbs, cooling her down. Y cargamos la sangre de la madre, limpiándola, calmándola, mojando su cuerpo, refrescándola. All the rivers, we make water and hushing sounds and play instruments.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Carolina and Isis. What a spectacular way to begin today's program. So first I'd like to introduce our principal dancer. Isis Avalos Perez is a mother and border crosser and a dance artist from South Texas, currently based in Los Angeles. Avalos received her bachelor's in fine arts from the University of North Texas. For 7 years, she toured nationally and internationally as a teaching, performing dance artist with Contratiempo. She's been featured in National Geographic and ACLU magazine, and most recently, she's been a guest artist at UC Riverside and UC Santa Barbara. She is currently adjunct professor of Latin social dance at Los Angeles Valley College. Now, before turning to part 2 of the program, I'd like to acknowledge that we, the Getty, inhabits the land that was once known as Tavangar, the home of the Gabrielino Tongva people. We show our respects to the Gabrielino Tongva people as well as all First People, past, present, and future, and honor their labor as the original caretakers of this land. Getty commits to building relationships with the Gabrielino Tongva community, and we invite you to acknowledge the history of this land and join us in caring for it. Now, guess I should say I am. I'm Andrew Perchuk. I'm the Deputy Director of the Getty Research Institute here. It's my pleasure to introduce the second part of the program, which will be a conversation between Carolina Caycedo, who is this year's GRI Artist in Residence, and Joseph Valencia. Carolina Caycedo is a Colombian multidisciplinary artist born in London and living in Los Angeles. Her immense geographic photographs, lively artist books, hanging sculptures, performances, films, and installations are not merely art objects, but gateways into larger discussions about how we treat each other and the world around us. During her residency here at the Getty, Caycedo has worked on the second volume of the Serpent River Book series, and today's performance came directly out of that book series, which explores how eco-social transition is being embodied by frontline communities in the Americas, presenting case studies woven together using eco-feminist and environmental justice frameworks. Joseph D. Valencia is curator at the Vincent Price Art Museum at East Los Angeles College, a scholar and writer of U.S. Latinx art and the art and politics of the Americas. He is currently co-organizing We Place Life at the Center, an exhibition, publication, and educational platform focused on art and environmental justice as part of PST Art and Science Collide. And we welcome you all to come and see all of the PST Art and Science Collide exhibitions this fall. This exhibition builds upon Caycedo's work, challenging traditional Western notions of art and science, while nurturing collaborations and networks of solidarity with artists, community scientists, and environmental leaders throughout the Western Hemisphere. So please join me in welcoming Carolina and Joseph.
Hola. Hi, everyone.
Testing, testing.
Thank you, Andrew, for the introduction, and Thisbe and all the team here that made this possible today. Thank you. And Isis, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to perform with you.
Yeah, I'm so honored to be here. And for those who may not know, PST Art is an initiative that stems out of years of research and planning and coordination. So Carolina and I have had the privilege of working together and thinking together already for several years, and thinking about a book and working very focused on the book for 2 years now. So I would just want to preface that by sharing that today our conversation will weave together a lot of different topics that connect as well to bookmaking and thinking about the Serpent River Book, how it connects to, Caro, your time at the Getty Research Institute, but also the parallel conversations that funnel or kind of fuel into our project at the Vincent Price Art Museum.
Oh. Yes, so what you saw today is a performance or an activation of the Serpent River Book, Volume 1. This was a publication done in 2017, actually, for the last PST, which was called LA, for an exhibition at LACMA. And the Serpent River Book 1, though it is a book that actually binds or bounds together visual and textual material that informs a lot of works but don't make it to the final artwork itself. And I think for a lot of people who may be artists or scholars or writers here, it happens to us a lot, right? We, in the process of researching, we collect, doing field work or doing research in archives, all kinds of materials, visual, textual, that doesn't necessarily make it to the final product, to the final manuscript. So the Serpent River Book is definitely a way to compile those materials and share them in a way that can be presented in a more sculptural way in an exhibition like you're seeing in this slide, but also in a way that can be activated through performance or choreography, as you saw today, or through workshop. It has become also a resource for workshopping. So this artist book is an offset print, a concertina fold or accordion bound, that has been distributed equally in archives like the Getty or different libraries, but also has been distributed among communities and collectives and social movements that are included in the book, whose work is included in the book. So for me, it was also a way to create a work of art that could be returned to the communities. Because a lot of times when we do field work and work with communities, it's very difficult for them to come either to the hegemonic center to see the pieces, or to bring a huge installation back to the community. So I really wanted to make a piece that could be left with the community as a gratitude token. As artists, we also incur in extractivist practices. We take images, we take information during field work, and sometimes we forget to leave stuff, or it's very difficult for us to come back and share the work. So the Serpent River Book was kind of attendant to all these issues, a way to revise the archive you build around a project, and a way to return to those that are involved in the project and don't have access to the centers of distribution.
Yeah, I just would say I love that we started off with this sort of activation, because not only is there's this return, but there's so many different ways, as we see, to engage with it, right? Whether it's studying it, or reading it, or performing with it, or sharing space with it. And thinking about our title, Bound Together, or actually Bound Ecologies, you know, I think about how not only are we thinking about various issues across the Americas, you know, ecological issues, but we're also thinking about how they do manifest in different projects, such as this book. So Carolina, I have a question thinking about how this book is dubbed Volume 1, right? And how, you know, in a book series, you know, where does that series, how does that shape your thinking behind this work and the planning for a new iteration?
So this volume 1 compiles material from collected or like put together from 2012 to 2017, when the book was published and exhibited for the first time. And I always conceived it as a series because it is a river, right? It is a river of information, and a river is never on its own. It has rivulets and streams and brooks, right? A river is a system of water, a basin. And so this series has to be the same, responding to that nature. So during the residency, what I've been doing is also revising information that now is from 2017 to 2024, but also informing that archive with materials from the from the Getty special collections and general collections. So what we're going to see in the next slides are some of those materials that I've been consulting and studying. This first number of slides are photographic works from different authors and from different geographies that I sourced by looking at traditional architecture and traditional agriculture. Because the second river book, while the first river book, or the volume 1, is looking more at the affectations of infrastructure, and it's part of a body of work that's called Be Damned, playing with the word dam, to dam a river, but also to curse a river or something. Situamos la vida en el centro, we place life at the center, which is the project we're going to be presenting at VPAM for PST, has a different focus, and it's looking more at the solutions and the alternatives that communities impacted by energy infrastructures are embodying in the Americas already. So how these transitions are taking place, responding to very particular context, and how a lot of these solutions are rooted in traditional technologies, scientific approaches that are indigenous, feminist, very, very connected to rural context, but also urban ones too. And so these are some materials that are responding to that search in the GRI. And I put them together to also understand how very similar technologies emerge and exist in different geographies across the world. So you see images here from the marshes between Iraq and Iran, but also images from the Vaupés, which is within the Amazonian basin in Colombia, the use of that reeds technique, or very similar canoe structures in Colombia, in the Orinoquia, which is also within the Amazon basin, or what was the French Indochina, which today is Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, or the use also of vegetable fiber in the construction of architectures, traditional architectures, either in what is today Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, or in that marsh ecosystem of the border between Iraq and Iran. So this is some of the things that I've been consulting and trying to see how the visuals of these ancestral technologies have been represented. These are rice field and also a kind of home garden or huerto. How do you say huerto in English? Yeah, garden, food garden. Very like decades apart, but responding to this wetland context. And this connects actually to one of the traditional technologies and one of the geographies that we are included in Situamos la vida en el centro, which is Xochimilco in Mexico, where we were last month, actually hosting one of the events and juntanzas, as we say in Spanish, or gatherings that are part of the educational platform of our project. So I really wanted to put this one. This is a traditional trajinera from Xochimilco, or boat, that if you see there's a visual analogy, also very visual similarity with those boats that we saw in the photographs, the black and white photographs. So Xochimilco, or maybe you want to tell a little bit about Xochimilco?
Sure, yeah. I'm curious, are folks familiar with Xochimilco? A little? I see a lot of
maybe
nodding.
The touristy part.
Well,
but
yes.
This is the real Xochimilco.
We're talking about present-day Mexico City, but what we know about its indigenous history, these channels of water, the floating city, basically, on the waters. There's these very sophisticated irrigation systems, or floating gardens, essentially, the chinampa, which was the other image, which you see here. And, nowadays, the access to this is kind of fraught, right? There's the touristic element. You can go on the trajineras, and you get your beers and your drinks and the music, and it's all fun, but it is it's not necessarily going back to what the function of these spaces were, right?
Mm-hmm. And the 3-day event or gathering that we hosted in Xochimilco that was called Sembrando Humedad, or Sowing Moisture, was precisely to build a relationship with collectives and with people who are working hard to preserve and to conserve that traditional way of growing food. That is the chinampa. So the chinampa is a piece of land. It's actually not floating. It's actually rooted and has been built since pre-colonial times, actually even before the Aztecs. It's a millenary technology. where the tall trees that you see behind the people, the ahuejotes, started rooting these pieces of land into the canals, and then food was grown there. And what you see, the almarcigo, which is this kind of bed of mud, is actually mud that's taken out of the channels, and it becomes the seedling bed. If any of you has a little garden, we use little pieces of plastic or cardboard or little milk boxes to start our seedlings. In Xochimilco, mud is taken out of the canal, and these little cubes with a rake are built, and then a seed is planted in one of these little cubes, and then this little piece of mud is broken off when the seedling starts to grow and put into the land. So this is one of the geographies that we're trying to bring together to replace life at the center.
Yeah, I would just add that part of the thinking of why Xochimilco of all of these different places and technologies, right? And VPAM, for those who are unfamiliar, is actually located at East Los Angeles College. And my colleagues in STEM actually created this aquaponics lab on campus, or garden, that's inspired by the same type of technology from the Chinampas, right? And so we thought, oh, well, we have students, we have this exhibition, there's this wonderful way to bridge connections between something that we don't view as a thing in the past, but right, this contemporary technology. And yes, I love these pictures here. So we actually just kind of dreamed up this idea that we could spend time on our campus, but also let's go to Xochimilco. And we did it, right? And not only was there the core of us, we're teaching a course in parallel to this exhibition, but so our students are our core as well. But so many different individuals and organizations were part of this encuentro, or this gathering. So this is an image on, I think, your left that shows our own Serpent River activation of the book in our time last month.
Yeah, so this course is taking place this semester. Joseph is teaching the course together with Chrissy Sepulveda, which is a professor at ELAC. She's a professor of
anthropology.
Anthropology. Mm-hmm. And 6 students from ELAC were selected. And so all this becomes part of the PST project, right? It's not only about making an exhibition, but how can we host and create spaces and host spaces that allow for deeper conversations and for conversations that can also catapult us to other geographies in the Americas and connect us with our geographies of the Americas, to learn from each other and to recognize each other in our struggles, right? That's important for me. That's always been an important part of my work. And this project, Situamos la vida en el centro, a little bit like Be Damned, and like this book does weave together different geographies across the Americas. I am interested in the hemispheric view because that's my experience as a transnational subject too. Like my parents are Colombian. I was born in London. I've lived in Puerto Rico, in Europe, now here in Southern California. I go back and forth the border, a lot of several times during the year. And I think it is important to, there's enough walls, and I think it's important to build bridges through the work that we do as cultural workers. And I think that was a little bit one of the intentions with Sembrando Humedad, was to solidify circuits of interaction, of solidarity too. This is one event, but it was 3 days, and what we wanted to do with Soy en Moisture was to build a program where there was no teachers or participants and students, but everyone was asked to provide a workshop, to provide a sharing of knowledge, a ritual, and those sharings took many different shapes, right? Performances, rituals. Like the students at ELAC presented a little fanzine they did.
Yeah, and that was also very exciting. We collaborated with an organization in Mexico City called Ruta del Castor. And so our students, on the other slide, you see some of the images of a zine. And if you could show it just really quickly, I want to reference, a big part of the project, as far as making it more than just an exhibition or a book, is I think the educational platform is I think the heart of it really, and how we extend beyond some of, extend the reach of these topics and these conversations. And something that in our course is every week we learned a new vocabulary term based off of this publication called the Pluriverse Dictionary. And so each student essentially became a lead on a word. And so what you see on the GIF, the rotating image, is their own kind of expression of this word, whether some of them are artists, some of them are scholars, right? Sentir pensar, environmental justice, energy sovereignty, civilizational transitions, earth spirituality, really thinking about how do we reconnect and reevaluate our relationship with the environment, with the natural world, but also thinking about how do we ground ourselves and environmental justice framework and language. And so I was just so proud of these students that we pulled together this zine basically in a week took 50 copies in the airplane.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but now that the semester is wrapping up, the exercise with the students is how they continue to be involved in the project and have a presence either in the publication or in the exhibition, right? Or the programming.
Programming, yeah.
So this is an image of my desk here at my Getty studio. Maybe we can play but it's also just to share how I access books and how I put them in relation, how I understand the visual connections. I think librarians here at the Getty must think I'm crazy because I think I have 200 books in my studio. It's not that I'm reading them all at the same time, but this is this exercise of opening them and making a relationship between what I see in the books, which is, if you see the Serpent River Book, there's like this process, this more visual process of analyzing and processing information. But I wanted to bring this up just to share also some of the images of our own process of editing the book, right? And how we have been consulting and accessing publications made by these communities and by these social movements. And it's amazing the richness of independent publishing that is happening in the Americas around environmental justice. And so these are some of the books that are distributed for free or independently by many of these collectives from Puerto Rico, from Colombia. And maybe this is a time to mention actually the geographies that this project is weaving together. So we're working with communities who have been active with the dismantling of dams along the Klamath River in Northern California and Southern Oregon. That's a liberation of a river that's happening right now. 4 dams are coming down. 2 have come down already, and 2 are in the process of being dismantled. Here in South California, we're working with here in Los Angeles, urban collectives around environmental justice. In Mexico, we're working with all those collectives in Xochimilco. Puerto Rico, we're working with collectives around food sovereignty and what in Puerto Rico is called energy insurrections. Colombia, also people working with alternative energy production, but in Colombia that is called communitarian energies or energías comunitarias, food sovereignty, and also trying to survive in the context of the country where most environmentalists get killed every year. In Brazil, also, we're working with the movement of people affected by dams. And in Chile, we're working with an indigenous community in Tierra del Fuego, the Shelknam people, which won a great battle last year when the Chilean government recognized that they're still alive after 100 years of like extinction narrative. So you imagine what that is for an indigenous collective to change that narrative and push and make a whole country recognize you, right? And in that process also being granted the right to roam their land and to defend and protect their land in Tierra del Fuego. Maybe you can tell something.
I love this because it shows, I should say this is a very process-based conversation. I always thought that I was a book nerd and I didn't know a lot of book nerds. And then we've been working together and having so much fun with so many of these books. And here's one day, actually a year ago, in Carolina's studio, where we did a mapping exercise, right, of so many of these books, of these what we've been calling assets. So essentially, we see the publication not necessarily as an exhibition catalog, although it does serve like that in some way, but as a gathering, right, and a manifestation of so many other materials, and really from all these communities and geographies that Carolina mentioned. And so here's an example of those two images on the left, each is standing in for its own chapter, right? And so this was our early stages of mapping the book out, which these have been refined over, I guess from this point, it's been 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we imagined the book for this project to be more like a textbook. So a book that you can work with, where you can take notes.
Or a workbook, right?
A workbook, yeah. Because a lot of the book, we commissioned, of course, some essays to build scholarship about this theme of eco-social transition in the Americas and art that accompanies activist processes. But we're also republishing existing materials out of this richness of materials that I was telling you about. And some of them are like manuals of how to build your own biodigester, or a community explanation of this concept of energy, communitarian energies. And so in this sense, we want the book to be able to navigate like a scholarly context and an contemporary art context, but we hope that this book also can be appreciated and used by the many communities that are informing this project too. So again, a book that builds bridges between maybe a more academic or artistic context and a more frontline activist communities. That sometimes there's they are connected, but sometimes I feel that as academics, as artists, we're always a step behind of what is actually happening, right? So how can we create a book that bridges these two worlds and like put them up to speed in a way? So that's a little bit of the intention of the book for Situamos la vida en el centro.
Yeah, these are some images, and maybe we could just sort of jump through them. But we're looking at a lot of different texts, and this is a recent project at LACMA that I fell in love with just because of the way. I think you open the book, and it's 20 pages of images of Colombian art of the ancient Colombia is essentially like photoshopped or presented over the landscape, right? So we see the ways that we have our museum kind of display strategies, and then this other kind of gesture of making these connections.
And this is a publication here also from special collections at GRI. This is the name of the book, Amazonas, una quimera poderosa, Amazon, a powerful, how do you say quimera in English? Ooh. Chimera. Yeah, thank you. But it's beautiful because it is a cartography, for me it goes beyond a simple map, right? It is a cartography of what we call territorio in Colombia, or in Spanish, of the territory. And the territory is the place that holds and embraces the relationships between human and non-human entities, from the cultural, the political, the economic, the spiritual, the political relationships that happen there. And I think this kind of cartography that entails all those relationships are the cartographies that I'm attached to. And also, a map that tells stories. It's not, a map that is a tool to hear other stories, to access other stories, to access other voices, and not just a tool to locate yourself in space, right? And the same for how you represent plants, or how plants are represented in this book, or in some of the other materials that I've been consulting at the Getty, like this wonderful book by artist Katie Holton, where she develops a tree typeface. So each tree silhouette corresponds to a letter, and she republishes texts from Julio Verne or Jules Verne, all the way to Extinction Rebellion, with this typeface, no? So really pointing, and these are all materials that have been informed and that I've been consulting during my time at GRI and informing the building up of the second volume too of the Serpent River Book, trying to point to that as humans we're not the only entity in this world that have the capacity for representation. I think plants, animals, and other mineral entities have the capacity of representation. I know that's kind of difficult for us to put into our head,
it transitions
but it is.
really well into thinking about some series of works that you've made in recent years, particularly your plant portraits and water portrait series, if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, this is an image of the plant portrait series. It's the first plant portrait called In Jarrow We Trust, and it's portraying the plant, the jarrow, which is a plant. This is actually, I did it for a project I did at Oxy Arts here in LA in 2021. That's when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, and suddenly our women health rights, we all felt, I think, in the United States as women that our rights started to be a little bit more fragile, and we all know what happened after. And jarrow is a plant that regulates menses, so it is an abortifacient, right? And that's why the name of this. It is, of course, kind of portraying the jarrow in the form of a female vulva. And I wanted to point at that also to remember what jarrow can do for us as women, but what can we do for jarrow too? Because relationships need to be reciprocal, right? They have to flow in both ways. And I use the word portrait also to kind of step away from the format and the concept of landscape, if you wish. Because I've understood that as artists, we have been complicit with the colonial gaze by representing nature through the landscape format. And if you think about the main formats in the two traditional formats in art, which is the landscape, which is this horizontal window through which we look at nature, but that puts us outside of nature as observers. But we're not outside of nature, we're actually embedded in what is not nature, because nature is also a construction. We are embedded in this set of relationships that make a territory. While portrait is this more vertical, if you wish, format, but it's a format, or it's a way to come closer to the subject you're studying or wanting to talk about or talk with, right? And so the process of making a plant portrait for me makes more sense at this point. First, as a way of unlearning givens that were taught to me in traditional academy and like art school, but also to understand that a plant can be much more than a natural representation, if you wish. And also to talk about my own relationships with plants, like with jarrow that I took. I did this series when I was pregnant with my second child. So jarrow, nettle, and root are all plants I took after I gave birth because they contract the uterus, they help with milk production, and they just, bring your internal reproductive system back to place. And so these are plants traditionally taken to make you heal faster. And to be there, like better prepared to take care of that baby that is now dependent of you. But the plant portraits also have this. So these are the original ones they're like small color pencil drawings. But the series also allows the possibility for this plant portrait to be reproduced in public space. As you saw the first one, this is a reproduction that took place late last year in a town in Colombia, in Onda. And it's also a way for me to kind of give away the work and not own it, right? To invite the possibility of rendering it and interpreting the original drawing the best you can or the way you want, because you also have a relationship to that plant. This one is the passiflora plant. How do you call it? Like the fruta de la pasión, flor de la pasión? Passiflower. Yeah, the passiflower, yeah. Which in Colombia, passiflora has a special connotation. We just well, we just know 6 years ago we signed a peace agreement with the FARC guerrilla. So paz and peace is at the core of a lot of political and cultural processes right now in Colombia. So I think this piece, and that we wanted to show it because it also talks about a lot of the things that we've been discussing of how we're conceiving the exhibition and the book, which is not a show of my work or text around my work, but it is a conversation of many people's work.
Yeah, challenging hierarchies and reevaluating the way that we can conduct business within an arts institution. I also want to point that to the plant portraits as a way of revealing or showing agency, right, for a plant, for these living or plant relatives, in other words, and of course the water portraits, which I believe is the next image, also speaks to that in the ways that bodies of water are not just resources to be exploited, but are their own entities that move and flow and grow and shrink, right? And you know, I love this install shot too, because it reminds me, of course, of the Serpent River Book too, in the ways that it flows and can be activated, and you have activated them, right?
With Isis, we have activated the water portraits for sure. We have put this piece in the water too. So yeah, this idea of portraying a living or a political subject with agency, you know, is important in this work. So maybe we can continue. And this ties to one of my favorite things that I've seen here at the GRI, which is this kind of suite of drawings by British artist Sam Winston. He did it a couple of years ago by invitation of the Barbican, and he created this ink out of the oak galls that are left after wasps put their eggs, with other, like with cloves. You see the list of ingredients there. And then he used this ink to do exercises of drawing. Each line corresponds to the duration of an exhalation. And the suite of drawings have different examples, like the one above is a single, like thicker stroke, and the one below are like many strokes with a thinner, probably brush. But I really like this piece because it brings together the tree as an active agent, right, as with this ink, the wasps, of course, because if there's no interaction between the tree and the wasps, there's no gulls from where to extract the ink. The relationship between what the bark absorbs through kind of respiration processes, in a way, what it absorbs from the atmosphere, and the relationship of, you know, with our own human process of respiration and breathing, and also time, no? What does it mean? No, that's why we were doing this exercise of trying to, like, also with Isis in the performance, to kind of sync our breathing and our respiration. And this is another image of that suite of drawings, and this visual analogy with the cover of the Book of Dust by Agnes Denes is really beautiful, because it's you know, these drawings by Sam are talking about the dust and the kind of, I don't know, colors and what this bark accumulates during the time. And I think they're both talking about pollution issues in very different ways. Sam in a very poetic way that has to do with our breathing and our own process of breathing pollutants when you live in a place like London. And Agnes Denes in her Book of Dust, The Beginning and the End of Time, where she actually, in 1989, is already listing pollutants in the air and giving recommendations and thinking futuristically, what are the implications of what the air carries, you know, what we're putting in our air. So I really, you know, a lot of, for me, also doing research in the archive is a way of building a genealogy too, right? And that's a very important process in my work. Like, what are the genealogies that inform your work, or that you stand upon, or you weave your work into, no?
Well, something else that with the oak gall, and I think in the next image is something that's reminded me a lot. Oh, this is more
More Denes, yeah.
Is symbols, right? Or how plants or things from nature can stand and to represent something so much more, these broader issues. And I love the way that you talk about the black walnut and the folks at Coyote Masawali and others. And I'm curious if you could share with folks here about what the black walnut means in Northeast LA and kind of the organizing around it as well.
So I came familiar with a collective in Northeast LA called Coyote Masawali. They operate from El Sereno, where I live. And they have been actively defending and protecting green spaces in our neighborhood, collaborating, as they say, with the black walnut, which is an endemic species here in Southern California, endangered, and that inhabits a lot of these green spaces, which are actually corridors that connect habitat. They're like habitat corridors. So the few green spaces that we have in Northeast LA are actually habitat corridors through which a lot of animals move along, right? And because we have such a corrupt city council that wants to build over all the green spaces in our city, and a lot of them have been jailed for that reason, I might remind you, we have the same problem in Sereno. And we have the few green spaces that we have projects embedded into them of 40, 200 units in different places, no? And Coyote Masawali has been able to stop these developments, or at least help them, by arguing and by bringing to attention to officials that they are inhabited by black walnuts. Like, for example, a place 3 blocks away from my home has 220 black walnuts, which, imagine what that does for a dense neighborhood like El Sereno. Why should they cut down? This like one of the few green spaces we have. So I really like how Coyote Masawali has built a whole programming for the community to learn about the black walnut, for us to start inhabiting and enjoying and developing a relationship with these green spaces and with the black walnut, and understanding the cycles of the black walnut. Inviting also the Tongva Gabrielino community to teach us about their ancestral relationship with the black walnut, which they have. That's the Tongva name, Takape Washut. And hosting, again, through their activism, hosting in these green spaces different events, family events, scholarly events, scientific events, artistic events, building community gardens, doing planting and seedlings of black walnuts. And they call the black walnut an activist, because it has been the black walnut, by its mere presence in these green spaces, that has been able to stop these constructions. So Coyote Masawali is one of the community members that we're also inviting. We're publishing, for example, these beautiful drawings and the kind of rich programming they're building. And this brings us to other kinds of activism too. I don't know if you want to.
No, I was going to say that the black walnut and some of these materials, we're slightly transitioning away from GRI materials and into materials that are represented in the exhibition and in the publication.
Yeah, so this is a community Asprosig, and also to talk about the different, when I'm talking about this hemispheric view and like weaving together these collectives and social movements across the Americas, with some of the communities I've had a sustained conversation and collaboration for over a decade, like with Asprosig, with Black Walnut, probably around 2 years ago that conversation started. So it's also a way to, again, to weave together different moments of the process and the research and the collaborations with different communities. So Asprosig is an organization in the wetlands of northern Colombia on the Rio Sinú, affected by the construction of a dam. That's the way we knew each other through that battle and that struggle. But they consider themselves an amphibian community, an amphibian culture, living between the different, they avoid the word flooding. They don't like to use it because it has a negative connotation. So they call their processes an adaptation to the different levels of water that comes into their communities. And they have developed what is called a BIF, which is Agrosistema Biodiverso Familiar, which is in their back gardens. They have been adding soil to elevate the height of the garden, so when the higher waters come, the rising of waters come, it doesn't inundate their garden. And they have a whole system of 6 different species that have to exist in that garden, so it really becomes an abyss. There has to be wood, so maderables, like wood trees that can be cut down and that can be also provide shadow. There has to be ornamental flowers and plants too. There has to be medicinal plants. There has to be what they call the energy plants, so a lot of beans and roots. There have to be the vegetables, and I'm missing one. Anyways, and then among the 6 different categories that they have brought to a BIF, you have to have at least 86 species in total in your garden for your garden to be declared a BIF by the community. But once you arrive that step, then they have understood by community collection of data that the whole way of life of the family improves, because suddenly you have everything you need in your backyard, and sometimes even more to create a very local market too, and to do exchange. So the abif, and this is a way I have kind of represented and interpreted in my work. This is a tapestry that I did last year, and if you see, not the one with the text, but on the other side, the different names. So each abif has their own name. El girasol, el sudor, that means the sweat. El fefere, that means like, I don't know, like little stuff that lays around. Las piedras, the stones. But the background of those individual kind of labels for each abif is a satellite view of the ancestral dikes and irrigation systems by the Senu people, which are very similar to the Xochimilco ones too, again, right? So this culture of actually existing and inhabiting with the different, the rising and the lowering of the water levels have existed across the Americas in different sites, and continue to be built upon by contemporary and communities today, no? And en función de la vida sabrosa means in function of the good life. I don't know if sabroso has really a translation, but something sabroso is something that's very tasty or very pleasurable. And so what I have also found and understood during all these years of fieldwork and conversation and collaboration is that joy, pleasure, and tastiness is part of the resistance and is a goal in itself for a lot of these communities. And sometimes very simple things in life is enough to have a dignified life, and this is what people are struggling for, a dignified life. The liberation of land, the autonomy of food, the autonomy of producing your electricity is to have a dignified life, nothing else. There's still some materials with GRI, but we were pointing out because the use of text in my work is important, the use of language, the playing of language and poetry, as you saw in the beginning with the performance, is important for me. And these are some of the materials that I've been referencing. I really like that visual poem by Richard Higgins. It's a very simple postcard, but again, that is giving this agency to fish and understanding where does the fish inhabit in words, but also in an ecosystem. And of course, Cecilia Vicuña, that's a great reference to me. The Getty, the GRI, the special collections has a beautiful quipu, the Chancani quipu, which is actually referring to breath and language, this work by Vicuña. So if you're not familiar with her work, she elaborates quipus of different sizes. Quipus are these nodding systems that are an ancient South American technology to track history and time and events in a community. And in this one, she made it with wool, and she's writing, you have to read the text not from left to right, but you have to read the text from right to left. It took me like an hour to understand how to read it, but I finally found how, which is also this kind of dislocation, or this kind of bringing, like, the good thing that this quipu does is that it just, you have to change the way you read to actually access it, no? And this invitation to step out of the center, or step out of the way you usually, and try to understand other perspectives, which I think is part of our project too.
It's a good transition to the last work here, which I think, not only seeing these materials, but seeing how you, in various aspects of your work, whether it be video or these sculptures, are also elevating narratives and kind of remixing sometimes. So there's reciprocal sacrifice, which will be in the exhibition. Do you want to preface a little?
Reciprocal Sacrifice is a video I did a couple of years ago in collaboration, or by invitation of the Sun Valley Museum of Art, which is in Idaho, and where different tribes have their ancestral homes, tribes that take care of the Snake River and that have been advocating for the dismantling of dams on the Snake River. And it's very urgent that these dams come down, because otherwise salmon is disappearing and will be extinct. And we're probably witnessing the extinction of wild salmon in this river now, in the next 3 years, if the dams don't come down. And so when I went to do field work, everyone is telling me about the importance of salmon, the tribal communities. Of course, salmon is a very close relative, and there's no way to imagine life without a relationship with the salmon. Everyone was talking about salmon. I was like, but what does salmon has to say? If salmon could talk, can we, and of course this is a work of like a speculation. And so in this video that was developed also, there's some language in Nimipu, which is the language of the Nez Perce tribe. It starts with some language. The salmon is inviting us to remember and to struggle and to fight for the dismantling of the river. So can we put the 3 minutes? We're going to see a 3-minute excerpt of the video, please.
Ke kahanya waton hinastam taina oikolona tidwatit yayana. Kim tem ke na titel wet hewehim. Min ma at genaswa payatayo. Not so him staka en pa uyet. Ka hisa put ne kuya. Inim zalak nats niu. Ka uskana tatse pas kun ko alsinu. Inehmutsa kutskeniko naswa payatayo. Kanech tats nun wakaswio kuspa. Inwas natsoch.
I am Chinook.
Inwas kalai.
I am Koho.
Inwas heye.
I am Steelhead.
Inwas koichts.
I am Sockeye. I spend most of my life in the ocean, but when I am strong and old enough, I leave the ocean's side to make it up the river in time for spring. I follow the teachings that my body carries. I go back to the place I was born, to the place where my ancestors returned before me. A long journey of remembering. Remembering to breathe fresh water after years in the salt. remembering to evade birds and other fish for hundreds of miles, remembering to swim the same rivers and forks, this time upstream, until I arrive at the particular creek or lake and fulfill the promises that organize life. Do you understand the joy of keeping the promises your ancestors made? We offered our body so that human would never go hungry. When salmon sacrificed ourselves to feed the people, water promised to be our home.
So yeah, those promises that we made to salmon, to protect the water so salmon can keep living, we've forgotten those promises. Or we're not upholding that original contract. So a lot of the work that we're presenting in Situamos, la vida en el centro is focusing light on people who are upholding, and movements and processes and transitions who are upholding those original contracts and remembering those original promises that organize life, as the video says, right? Because it seems that we are embedded in processes of death instead of life. And so how can we remember to honor those original promises that uplift life and that allow life to thrive instead of engaging in processes of death? That's a big question in the work. And those are the processes that I'm interested in learning about and having a conversation with in this project. That's why we call the project Situamos la vida en el centro. We place life at the center. And though we name a center, we're not talking about one center, we're talking about many centers in this project. We're talking about a pluriverse instead of a universal truth, but many, many truths and many, many ways of upholding life. And of course, this video is speaking about that. These are, I think we want to open it to Q&A, so we're going to go quickly through the last slides, but these are some images also from the special collection. This is a beautiful sketch by Barbara T. Smith, her papers that have been recently processed and are we're being able to access here. I really like the way she organized her thinking too, around or kind of gyrating in movement almost, no? And the different compromises and promises she makes through these note-takings. The other one, of course, I've been looking a lot at artist books and Concertina Fold, a book by Brian D. Tripp, who is a Karuk, or who was a Karuk artist. And I really like the way he was annotating also, and changing the narratives over these kind of bonds and stocks and kind of market, market numbers. It reminded me visually of some of the visuals that a collective that is also being part of our project called Un Río Cauca, Muchos Mundos, a Cauca River, many worlds, that are in south of Colombia, close to Cali, the city of Cali. Also their logo, but also the way they have built their timeline and the timeline of the resistance, which starts in 1507, I think. I can't see very well. 1530, the moment where enslaved people arrive to the Americas, all the way to 2024, and how their resistance has been organized through these centuries, right? So really changing those narratives and really being able to trace their resistance and their dignity all the way back. This is 2 pages of a book by Cecilia Vicuña Sabor a Mí. She published this when she was exiled in London, but was speaking also about, I really like to think, this was really inspiring to find in the special collections. She talks about the process of Salvador Allende nationalizing copper industries and different industries, and understanding that her art and her cultural work had to be nationalized in a similar process, and calling to action to her fellow cultural workers in a collective sense. And this is another piece I accessed it was this publication that happened for a number of years in the 60s, this was number one, called Black Mask. Also speaking about an occupation of MoMA in 66. But I accessed it a few days after this happened, which is really great to understand how almost 40 years ago, there's still this strategy of occupying places of power. It was working, and we still continue to do this because things don't seem to change, and direct action seems to be the only way. And we wanted to close this with this slide. So this is an image of a protest that took place in the atrium at MoMA a couple of months ago, demanding that board members of MoMA who are investors in arm industries divest or leave the board at MoMA. But what happened is that it took place under my work in the atrium. So the sculptures that you see hanging there is part of the Cosmotarraya series. These are artisanal, handmade fishing nets. It's a series that I've been doing for a number of years already. This one in particular is called Spiral of Shared Dreams, that I did in collaboration with 4 fishing cooperatives in Mexico. And I had nothing to do with the protest, but for me it was really special and also hard, you know, because I did feel complicit to have my work at MoMA at that point, but really special to feel that the spaces we create, the exhibitions we create, the work we create can host and can embrace other narratives, other people's struggles and preoccupations. And I think for me, that's what art is about, is not only talking about my aesthetic, my feelings. I'm not interested in just doing that. I'm interested in having conversations. And I think in that sense, that's what we're trying to do with Situamos, la vida, centro, is how can we create a book and exhibition that can embrace, as Isis and me did, and can host and take care of others and of other people's preoccupations and ideas and struggles.
That's... Should we add her? We have time for some Q&A, and we love to invite Isis up to the stage as well for folks who might have questions. Should I? Okay.
While you think about your questions, the show at Vincent Price Art Museum opens September 24th.
28th.
Oh, September
Saturday
28th.
the 28th.
You're all very, very invited. It's going to run until March 1st. We're hoping to have the book ready by the end of the year so we can include exhibition plates. It's a bilingual book. It's going to be published by Artist Books, which is a local publishing house, artist-run publishing house. And
we're editing together.
That we're editing. We're co-editing the book. And yeah, so you're all invited to that. I think this PST is going to be a great one.
Are there any questions for any of us on stage or related to what we've experienced together today? Yes, we have a mic coming, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, how do you work with indigenous peoples and human and more than human peoples in terms of giving space and cultural differences? So as somebody from a particular place going to other places, I am learning about indigeneity in part through the voices, through the images, the languages. How do you relate different spaces from where you're coming from to where you're going? And I guess at one level it is, that's the question, is how do you create space for the indigeneity so that in your representations you aren't merely mirroring, but maybe showing consciously that there are differences and this is interpretation. There are different communities. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, and this is for, sorry, the artist, the main artist here. Yeah.
I think different in different ways. With some tribes or community members that are indigenous, I've had a conversation for years, and so it's a continuation of that conversation and that collaboration. With some people that I've wanted to involve them in the project, it hasn't happened actually. So there's also a bit of frustration in that sense, but also an understanding that at this moment there's no alignment, or maybe some communities have other priorities, and understanding and respecting that. But basically, I think the first way that I approach a community I want to work with is asking permission. That's been kind of a protocol that I've learned to establish in my practice. So it's asking permission and offering the resources I have at hand to what may be priority in their agendas, and that not only with indigeneity, but with also rural or campesino or farm subsistence communities that also have their own particularities and needs. I think also well, understanding that in a way my mestiza identity in a way is rooted in indigeneity in different ways, but also trying to trace that and being very honest and transparent about that with the communities. And I think the exercise of breaking hierarchies in this exhibition and this bookmaking, and in inviting other artists and other cultural workers from different communities and cultures and experiences and life experiences to be part of the exhibition and the show, and the way they want to be part of it is a way. I think we're also honoring processes that are already in place, and I think that for example, the Shelknam process, we're trying to highlight that was such tremendous work and effort by the Shelknam community in Chile, is asking them to share that experience instead of building more or making them work more. The same with one of the texts in the book is actually a transcription of a conversation between a Tongva artist and a Huichol artist who have collaborated before in curating shows, Mercedes Orame and Joel Garcia. So asking them to continue their conversation and supporting the continuation of something that is in place already. So a lot of the strategy and the tactics of this exhibition is asking people to continue, or how can we support with the resources we have honed through the research and implementation funds of the PST, is how can we redistribute these by supporting processes that are already in place, and that they feel that they have, that this exhibition or this book is aligned with the agenda in place. Some people have accepted that invitation and some others have not. So I guess that's a little bit how it has worked. For me, the process of unlearning and of looking to other ways of understanding art and science, particularly in the framework of this PST, has brought up spaces of healing and ceremony, and I think hopefully that can also be reflected, or that the exhibition and the book can also host and embrace spaces for that kind of rituality. And one of the things that is happening in the pedagogical platform that we didn't talk about is that to mark the closing of the exhibition, we are hosting a gathering or a juntanza that we're calling Respire, or El Respiro, here in Southern California. And people from across the Americas who have been participating are gathering to close the exhibition precisely to that, to respire, to gather strength, to continue this long-term commitment or conversation between us. And I think these spaces of juntanza, as we call them in Spanish, and of gathering and of conversation with a goal of recovering and of healing, is rooted in medicinal and ritual practices, I think. So hopefully this is a space for some of that technology, old technology, to come alive and to heal us. I don't know if you want to address that too from a curatorial perspective.
You said it so eloquently, but also just that no instance is the same with the copy and paste, right? That we navigate them very intentionally, and even with what I thought was so wonderful, like being able to reallocate project funds directly to whether they be indigenous or kind of frontline or like environmental organizational groups in Los Angeles, with no strings attached, right? Not this expectation that now you need to be part of the project, but that this is just something that we think is necessary and critical for us in the work that we're doing. So I think it definitely, to avoid that flattening approach, I think, of not only of indigeneity, right, but of different perspectives and how that actually then requires much more time and care in the way we engage with one another. Do we have time for more questions? I can't see if this viewer. Another question? In the back here? Mm-hmm.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm really kind of super interested in the book in terms of just its structure and the fact that it exists. And I was really interested in your process visually, like seeing your 200 books on your desk and how they communicate with each other. And the thing that really stuck with me is when you said, if I understood you right, was part of the reason for the conception of a book was because of the nature of the thing in how artistry and academia navigates source material. It's experiential, and then you take, and a lot of times you forget to leave. And I thought that was really profound. So I guess my question is that something that you've always tried to do within your work prior? Is that something that you found through this process? And either way, is it kind of always a bit of a North Star for you as you embark on new projects in terms of reverse engineering what this wants to be and making sure that you leave something?
No, I learned the hard way, and it was the communities that say, hey, you're engaging in something extractive also. So no, it's a learning process, no? And when you work with many people and collaborate with many people, choreographers, curators, community members, a lot of the time these folks remind you and put your feet in the ground, and so I think it's a constant exercise of respecting those contracts, those original contracts, or remind, like, we do live in such a capitalist, and the contemporary art world is such an extractive context too, that it is a hard exercise to remind myself to be reciprocal and to reflect about the different audiences that I want my work to have. And I think one of the ways is to create a book, or for me, to create a beautiful piece of art that anyone and everyone has the right and deserves. We all deserve a beautiful piece of art, and we all have the right to it. And to build it in a way that I can easily take it back and leave it with the community. Because I like to make huge things too, and huge installations, but I can't take those back to the community. So how can I think about smaller things, or things in additions that can go and stay? In this case, the book, for example, and I think I mentioned it when I presented it upstairs in the garden, the upper part is a river of images, because a lot of the people that I work with don't have the knowledge of reading. They have other ways of accessing and sharing knowledge, not necessarily reading. So that was very intentional in the book, how to make a book for someone who doesn't read but has other ways of understanding and processing information or knowledge. So yeah, it has been like a learning curve, and it has something that for me, it's a very important protocol of my work. What can I leave, or what can I take back? Yeah. I want to say something else, I forgot. But yeah.
Reciprocity is also a very core indigenous kind of terms of engagement.
Yeah, it has to do, and that's a big theme in the exhibition, actually, the act and the exercise of paying back, right? Paying back what you receive. Nothing is for free, and certainly nothing in nature, what we call nature, is for free, but we continue to take from it as it was for free. So how can we pay back? What are our rituals and our exercises of paying back? And that brings us back, for example, to this term of economy and ecology. They have the same root, which is building home or keeping the home safe. Reciprocity is certainly an economic protocol, is to give back, to return, to continue the exchange, because if you give back, then the other has to give back, and then you give back. So reciprocity is a way of strengthening relationships too. So it's also a strategy to continue the conversation and to build trust and to strengthen bonds and collaborations.
Maybe one more question. I'm trying to think on time here. If not, sure.
Thank you. I had a question for Isis about, I think, your relationship to this project as an educational platform, because I had been learning from your introduction that you are obviously a teacher as an important part of your identity, and I'm curious just to hear you say about the process of dance or movement as kind of a component of education and teaching.
Thank you for asking that. It's been a great experience being able to actually take the book home and really go through it, and also have my own process as a student and learning through the images and text in the book. I grew up on the border next to the Rio Grande River, Rio Bravo, and my connection to the river is very, very deep, as I have also crossed it with my family. And so my experience of being a border crosser, because I grew up on the borderland in South Texas, and also now being in Southern California, on Tongva land, I see the way that our bodies, my body, has inhabited a lot of migration, and I'm in constant curiosity in the ways that I've been able to cross the border back and forth between Mexico, my parents live in Mexico, and in the US, and understanding the way that my body has an experience of crossing the river, crossing bridges, and also the way that my body has absorbed music and movement, and my both binational cultures as being Mexican American. And so I'm currently, I teach Latin social dance forms as also through the lens of affirming indigenous and Afro-rooted movement that came across through, the effects of transatlantic slave trade, and also those effects of forced enslavement of people with the uniting of indigenous peoples already on the land, what is now known Colombia or Mexico, what birthed out of that. These deeply rooted movement forms like cumbia dance or salsa that also have migrated through the Americas. And so it's not just, I think it's interesting hearing the Xochimilco part about tourism, and then also understanding it in the sense of like, oh, these are water systems, this is technology, ancient technology. Is the same thing with movement and dance. We see social Latin dance as like, it could be entertaining as well, and yet it's deeply rooted in Afro-Indigenous wisdom. And so I'm also one of the classes that I'm currently teaching once a month as part of a pop-up series is called Atraviesa, which means to just go through, transcend. And so through this, it's a all levels movement class where I really talk about that we all carry our own histories, wherever you have navigated from, migrated from, but that we let, through music and just moving together, we let our own histories in our bodies inform the way that we move. And so it's been a great process to also kind of navigate myself in that way. But I see so much of that connection of, it's undeniable the way that our bodies, for instance, we are here right now, we're seated, and then we're going to travel somewhere else, and then it continues to migrate, right? And every experience, every migration, every movement we have informs and continues to be in conversation with your body. So we're constantly in relationship with migration. So that's the way I kind of root a lot of the way that I teach.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think of something that I wanted to add to Anthony's question too, is that how can you make a book that allows you to sentipensar? And how, so sentipensar, to think, feel, a book that not only makes you think, but also makes you feel. And how, for example, that dancing technology is rooted in thinking, feeling, and sentipensar, no? That has been very important in my work, the body as a source of knowledge. Actually, we're hoping to record and film something here at the Getty to talk about that. Not only books as sources of knowledge, but our bodies that hold all this knowledge, this accumulated knowledge, this inherited knowledge, and how these technologies of transition, of eco-social transition, are rooted in processes of sentipensar across the Americas, no? How do we feel, think with the land and with the plants and with the water and with the minerals?
Yeah, and I think that just my experience in teaching and moving with folks that don't consider themselves dancers or that just really want to move, I often have the experience of that blockage, like a damming or the wall, the border of I can't sentipensar in a sense, because I do feel we are results of the society that we exist in, and I think there's a lot of pragmatism and a lot of honoring of this up here, but not understanding that the body truly is actually informing so much more the brain and how we feel. So I do exercises in which I get movers to truly start to feel and think and move through that body, right? Break through those channels of just being able to find that release. And a lot of that tension, you know, that we are unaware of, it shows up in classes like this, movement classes, dance classes. And so it's really interesting how I have been so much informed through research in that way, of the way, you know, we see this in maps and landscapes, and yet we are that landscape as well, and we have certain dams through our body, or flowing rivers in some ways, but it's so much such a dialogue, a conversation that's always connected.
I think that's a really beautiful place to stop, and from what I understand, we have a reception as well, so we invite you to continue these conversations. We'll be around. Is it just outside, up the stairs outside? And I believe the museum is open until 8 p.m. as well, so thank you all for coming, and we're thrilled.